Well, you know, we've been bringing you stories about the economy for the last year. The reason why we do stories that would normally find room in business papers or business channels on a channel like this one is because we believe this is information that you are entitled to. You are entitled to know how our economy is doing. You're entitled to have all of the information. The data on the economy has just gotten worse. Remember the fact that sales of cars and two-wheelers were down, and we've told you this a couple of times. Over the last couple of days, details have now emerged that production cuts have been decided upon and reported in the press. Now, sales of domestic passenger cars have declined 18% in the month of June when you compare it to June last year. Car sales altogether, passenger car sales, were down 25% for June. Motorcycle sales are down 12%. Honda Car India sales have dropped 41% in June 2019. Maruti Suzuki, which is our biggest, really has seen a sales drop of 17%. Now, this is the 8th straight month where car sales in India have fallen. And India was always known as a market where car sales would keep increasing, and we would actually be having conversations on whether it was up 10% or 11% or 12%. It is now down 20%. The guys who are worst hit are the dealers. The dealers are struggling because they currently have 50% more inventory than they would normally have. Now, those cars have to be kept somewhere, and that costs money. And what's worse is they have to pay GST on the cars that they haven't sold and are in inventory right now. Now, reports suggest there are more than, and hold your breath for this, there are more than 500,000 cars worth 35,000 crore rupees unsold right now, lying in dealerships across the country on the 1st of June. There are 3 million motorcycles worth 17,000 crore rupees at least in the dealerships right now. Several dealerships have even closed down because they have not been able to maintain the cash flow that they need to keep their doors open. Now, consider what this means for jobs. This in turn has resulted in India's top auto manufacturers announcing what they call factory shutdowns for this quarter. Now, factory shutdowns are basically when they plan out and they shut their factories for a certain number of days in the quarter because they're bringing down the number of cars they manufacture so as to not fill the market with a glut of unsold cars. This also means that for the days that the factory is shut down, factory workers don't get paid. A lot of them are contract workers and not employees. Now, according to my colleagues at the Economic Times, 7 out of the top 10 auto manufacturers in India have decided to cut production and to reduce on an average output in the entire market by 20 to 25% in May or June. This could be the worst slowdown the industry has seen in India. While many had expected the numbers of a slowing car industry to improve after the elections results came out for 2 reasons. One, the government kept telling us that people were holding off on purchase decisions until after the clarity of the elections. We have clarity now, and we have a clear majority government. We also have majority government in stability for the next 5 years. So we should be seeing some signs of revival. In fact, it's actually getting worse. Companies have now asked the government to reduce the GST on cars from 28% to 18% so that they can improve sales and add some more affordability to their market. Now, this is bad news for 2 reasons. Like I said, when factories shut down and they're not functioning at full capacity, it puts jobs at risk. Shutting down of dealerships is not good for the job market either. And car sales, more importantly, are normally taken as an indicator of health and optimism in the economy. Brings us back to the question of, are we in deep trouble? I don't think it's fair to even ask anymore if we are in trouble or not, because the truth is we are in trouble. There isn't a single indicator that's pointing in the other direction. The question is, how bad is it? To answer that question for us, Zafar Islam of the BJP, Mr. Jagdish Khattar, former Managing Director of Maruti Suzuki, and I'm very pleased to have him on the conversation, and Mr. Mohan Guruswamy, Senior Economist and former Advisor to the Finance Minister of India. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you for joining us. Mr. Khattar, I will start with you. You're the expert of this industry. Would you term this the worst slowdown the industry has seen in India?
Yes, I think so. I mean, even when I was in Maruti for about 15 years, we had a couple of times slowdown, but it didn't last very long. And even during the slowdown, we were able to see that the things kept moving. But this time, I think the situation is pretty bleak. And if you go into the reasons, I can give you a dozen reasons, and each one of them very valid and fairly strong. And my view is that there is no shortcut. And even as you mentioned, if the GST was to be reduced, is not going to make much of a difference. And can I come down? I mean, I'll give you some few reasons for it. First of all, the car industry grows along with with our growth, and usually it is 1.5% of the GDP. That's not taking place. Worse, 70–80% of our cars are sold on finance. You're aware, earlier the public sector banks were not disbursing, and for the last few months, even the NBFCs have stopped financing. That's a huge problem, not only for the customers, even for the dealers, when you say that they have stocks, because the banks have started shrinking, reducing their working capital for security reasons. Finance is not there. Third, 2 years back, of our total car sales, 40% were diesel. For various reasons, court orders, etc., 10 years, 15 years, sorry, which is not in the law, but Supreme Court passed an order over 10 years, diesel vehicles have to be scrapped. They can't be used here. So from 40%, the diesel sales have come down to less than 20. You can't replace 25% of diesel cars by petrol overnight. It doesn't work. Third, very important is, India is the only country in which the emission norms were leapfrogged. We had decided in early 2000 that India will always be 4 years behind emission norms of Europe. And we had a 10-year roadmap. Industry knew, we knew, and we went according to that. Suddenly, 2 years back, 3 years back, the government decided that from Euro 4, you will go to Euro 6. 1,60,000 crores, or roundabout, have been invested by industry and the petroleum companies. Now, the moment Euro 6, which is coming, the prices will go up because of new technology, because of the jump in technology. So my fear is, if you were to say that, during festival season, end of the year, things will improve, it won't, because the prices will go up. Then Supreme Court issued an order that at the time of purchase of cars or motorcycles, you have to take 3 years insurance and 5 years for motorcycles. Add more to the cost. Then again in urban area, there is no growth in urban area. You have traffic problems, you have parking problems. So people are having doubts about it. And the important thing is, of the total car sales, 40–45% are first-time buyers. 55–60% are those who buy a higher model or additional car in the family. Now, let's look at it. Put ourselves in the shoes of the customer. He can always defer upgrading a car. He can always defer purchasing another one in the family. So out of 60%, even if few percent were to postpone it, you see the decline. On top of that, you have Ola, you have Uber. I mean, I can go on and tell you various reasons why all these things have come suddenly, and you are finding this.
Yes. In fact, I want to ask this, take the question now to Mr. Guruswamy. Mr. Guruswamy, good evening. Is this, as Mr. Khattar was describing, a combination of various factors, laws that have changed, Supreme Court rulings, or does this have to do with our economy? Because the question I'm fundamentally asking is this: there are people currently watching all over the country on this channel. Should they be concerned about these numbers, or is it specific to one industry that really this shouldn't bother me or my family?
What we are seeing is a massive demand contraction, not in just this sector, but across the board in many sectors. White goods are down, air conditioning is down, rains are down, offtake of tractors is down. So it's just not four-wheelers, two-wheelers. Two-wheelers actually the bellwether of the economy. Tractors. So it's just across the board. So there's a there's a situation in the economy where we have stopped investing in the economy. Our banks cannot advance finance to stimulate consumption because the banks haven't been restructured last 5 years, 6 years. This government inherited a bad situation with the banks, but they haven't been able to do anything. And this budget, they have kept aside 72,000 crores to refinance banks, but that won't be enough. And production is down all along. So what can you do? There's no investment. Investment is now less than 3% of GDP. So how are you going to kick this off? And you keep giving away money on subsidies. You give away 72,000 crores to BSNL now, another 43,000 crores to Air India. So where is the money going to come for investment? And investment has a multiplier effect. And the automobile industry particularly is a huge value addition industry. If you take a car, if it's a ton of steel, then it's converted from the cost of a ton of steel to something worth 7, 8, 10 lakhs of rupees through a process of value addition. So that value addition chain is lost. It's just not the ton of steel which is lost. So this loss in the huge value addition industries is huge. So ancillaries get knocked out, workmen get laid off. I personally, on a personal note, I had a tenant who was a two-wheeler dealer, and he had to close down this month. Poor chap just had to lock up. He said, there are no sales, my inventory is piled up, I have no more money. And the company wants me to buy some more vehicles, I can't take it, so I'm giving up the dealership.
But Mr.
So
Goswami,
this afternoon, my wife and I were driving through
Yes.
the main street,
Yes.
and we passed through 4 car dealerships. We drove past them. There's not a single person in those car dealerships. You know, so things are bad. I think the finance minister and the prime minister should recognize this and take emergency measures to set this economy right, pump prime the economy to get it going.
Mr. Guruswamy, I have a couple of questions for you. Gajendra Thomar has asked us, is the demand contraction a global phenomena? Does it have to do with India? There's another question from one of our viewers who said, could this perhaps be people, Mahavir Kumar, could this be possibility of people not buying cars for environmental concerns? Your answers to those questions, Mr. Guruswamy.
I think there isn't a global contraction. What we are seeing in India is a contraction. China has had a decline in growth, but not a contraction. And they're buying something like 9 million cars a year there. The U.S. market is not seeing a contraction. Matter of fact, the U.S. economy is extremely healthy now. They just added 2 lakh jobs last month. So all over the world, it's a peculiar situation in India where, like Mr. Khattar said, most of the cars are bought in financing. The banks have no money to give.
Yes.
So where are you going to buy cars from? Even if you want to buy a car, where is the money going to come from?
In fact,
So,
yes.
Whether pollution, people are not concerned. They will buy cars. It's cars, a status symbol. It's a necessity. It's all that, And, and it's a sign of having arrived successfully. And people are scared now. You see, the job market becomes so. IT sector, I was asking somebody in the IT sector the other day. They said, no, we're not buying any houses, any cars now. The whole Hyderabad, which was growing because of the IT sector, there's a standstill in real estate.
Yes, in fact, I just on that point want to share some information.
It's people are just scared, so you got to revive the mood.
Growth in banks' retail loan portfolio has seen a downward trend since November last year. In fact, while home loans have only seen a marginal improvement, the year-on-year increase in the retail outstandings has actually come down. So this is what Mr. Guruswamy was talking about, that you have to be, in order to buy cars, you have to borrow from banks. And the bank loans are not growing, which shows that nobody's taking loans, the banks are not giving loans, which means no one is growing. Mr. Zafar Islam is with us of the BJP. Mr. Islam, we also have another question here from our viewers, and you will find this interesting. Someone has asked us, why are we bringing politics into it? Why can't we have this conversation without involving politics? Now, here's my answer to that. Your party currently runs the government. It is up to you and, the minds in your party to make decisions on how to change the headwinds that India is facing right now, and how to change the circumstances. So I want to understand from you if the government sees this as an emergency situation, and are there steps being taken to fix the problem?
Well, Faye, let me give you some background, some reasons which has already been explained by Mr. Khattar. But let me add a few more reasons why the situation what we have today and why we are facing this problem. First of all, as far as we understand, it is a cyclical problem. It's a cyclical slowdown. It's not a slowdown where we are seeing because of some certain reasons. This has been seen in the past. Of course, it has been coupled with some other issues. That's why we are seeing this situation what we have today. But let me tell you a few important data points, and that probably will explain why we are in this situation. First of all, the NBFC issue, as Mr. Khattar had highlighted, that it is NBFC which was actually doing all the asset-backed financing. In fact, bank had stopped long back, but it was NBFC which was providing all the loans, and it is not 60-70, but in fact, NBFC's loan portfolio, if you see, asset-backed financing is almost 85%, and all the car loans were being financed by NBFC. And NBFC, we know that we had problem in NBFC, and that has been fixed by the government in this
No,
current
I don't believe
budget,
it's been fixed, Mr.
both
Islam.
bank has been recapitalized and bank has also been such.
No,
I'm saying that
that would be
the NBFC's
misrepresentation.
concern has been addressed that they can sell these assets to bank. No, of course, this bank.
Only the really healthy
what the liquidity
NBFCs can
problem
sell
they're facing,
assets,
the
and
bank
the
has been
problem
given
is
that-
not with healthy
but
NBFCs,
that
Mr.
flexibility-
Islam. But we're changing the subject. Let's not change the subject at this point. Let's focus on the car
No, all I'm saying
industry.
that
Banks are not
because of
investing
this
in NBFCs.
Secondly,
No,
that one
focus,
person.
focus on the car industry, Mr.
Secondly,
Islam. Do
no,
you
the
see
problem is,
this as an
it's not
indicator of a
structural
slowdown, yes or
It's
no?
not a structural slowdown, it's a cyclical slowdown. So,
What is the difference between a structural slowdown and a cyclical
no,
slowdown?
it's like you have given time to everyone to speak. No.
No, because you went off
like
topic,
you
and
have
I
given
would like you to
time
stay on
everyone
topic,
to
please.
speak. Allow me to speak, and then you can. No, I'm not moving. I'm just coming back to that.
Okay.
All I'm saying that one problem is NBFC financing. That is the biggest problem, which because of this it has slowed down. Secondly, the car manufacturers actually they didn't realize this problem that they had to slow down the production. They continued producing, so they are left with huge inventory. And suddenly they had to cut down the production. That is because now they have to sell at as Mr. Khattar rightly pointed out that everybody is deferring their decision because they see that there is inventory. They may get better discount, and that's why the consumers are waiting for a better discount because everyone knows that the car manufacturers are reducing their
Mr. Islam.
production and they are left with huge inventory, so eventually they will get a better. That third, which is again the government, because of the election, the government is a big buyer of the cars, but the government had also stopped during election, and that's why again you have another problem that government was not buying. So all these issues came together, and that's why it has slowed down. But we see that since the NBFC issue is being resolved, the financing issues, the liquidity issues being resolved, and all
right. Let me bring in rebuttals before we run out of time.
Now the rain is there also. So
the rain is nowhere.
All these issues will ensure that we will have demand. This will spur demand going forward.
Okay, all right. So let's take this piece by piece.
Especially
I
as
just
the
want to
interest
point
rate
out.
has
Okay,
also
one
come
second. I just want to point out. In retrospect, Mr. Islam had argued about a year ago when we were talking about a slowdown. He said, "Look at the car sales. Look at the car sales." Now he's arguing that the car sales are for a completely different reason. Secondly, about 5 months ago, when we argued
It's
about...
only for a quarter.
No, now don't
The last
interrupt
2
me.
quarters. Away from
No,
that,
one second. Now don't interrupt me. Do you know all of this
No,
to
but
be
you
true?
you can't have 5 years. What last 2 quarters because of NBFC problem? You can't ignore that the.
No, okay, fine. I heard you out. We all heard you out. No, now don't interrupt me. No, one second. Allow my audience to hear me, Mr.
And that will
Islam.
get addressed.
Allow my audience to hear me. Secondly...
No, you cannot interrupt me. You cannot keep on interrupting me and not allow me to speak.
Are
At
you
least
done?
allow me to at least complete and then you can
Did you not
interrupt.
complete? I'm
You can
sorry, I
speak
thought you were
whatever
done. Have you not completed?
Yes. I have completed now. You
All
can
right, okay.
carry. You can go ahead.
About 4 months ago, when we talked about a slowdown, Mr. Islam argued that because there's an election on, people are withholding their decisions because they want the election to get over, and when they have clarity of after the election, that's when they will go out and make their big purchases. Now he's arguing that people are withholding their decisions because they want discounts. Actually, people are probably withholding their decisions because they don't know if they'll have a job next month, and there are that kind of job cuts that are taking place in everybody's offices, and that's probably the larger reason.
Right.
But instead of arguing all of these other things, we have to simply look at the car market. What happens in the factories when big companies like Maruti and Ford and Mahindra decide that they're going to do factory shutdowns? What happens to those factory workers? What happens when dealers shut down? What happens to the people who are working in those dealers? What happens to the service, the after-sales service guys who are used to a certain amount? And the auto industry is huge. And it has these tentacles of people who depend on it. They make nuts and bolts and paint and tires and rubber and all of these other seat covers and all of these things. When the auto industry suffers, everybody suffers. Mr. Khattar, is it fair at this point to say it's the NBFC slowdown? Could it be larger than that? And do you see this as a problem that the government must fix and not wait for the cycle to turn?
You see, let me put it this way. I don't think it's cyclic anymore because the slowdown has been for a much longer period. Even when we had slowdown, cyclic slowdown, we could see the end of the tunnel. That's not taking place. Secondly, as you mentioned, car manufacturers add only 20% to the value. 80% comes from hundreds of vendors. Now, those are the vendors who don't have so much of capacity, who get money on a daily basis from the manufacturers. And they are in trouble today. Your dealers are also, as you mentioned, every dealership has a minimum of 150 to 200 people, including mechanics and all other things. 300 of them have closed down in the last few months. Now, my only fear is, as mentioned, that manufacturers dumped the vehicles with the dealers. Fact is that they were expecting a very good sale during last festival season. You always anticipate, you produce, and you make it available in the dealership. That sale didn't take place. The second cycle is at the end of the year, when the model is getting old, you give discounts and you give clearance sale. That didn't happen. Therefore, accumulation of this, you had the dealers' stock, and the manufacturers are now trying to calibrate it and bring it down. See, my other very important thing is, as far as you're talking about car, I'll go a little bit to the two-wheelers. The controversy that is taking place because of electric two-wheelers.
Yes.
Again, customers are postponing it, thinking that the new ones are going to come. So, there are so many reasons which are, first, jobs, yes. I met people, they say, "Arey sahab, humko kya malum hai, hum EMI aage de payenge ya nahi de payenge, we already have an EMI." So, a combination of all this is taking place. And other is, about 30-35% of the cars are sold outside the big cities. The purchasing, there is an effect even in the rural area. So those sales are also not taking place. And surprisingly, I think many of you must have read, young people are not buying cars today.
Yes.
The survey shows that they now believe in renting and not purchasing. And their preference is traveling, fitness, and all other things. There was a time 10 years earlier, the moment you got a job, they applied for a car. That they are not doing again. So there are so many reasons. I won't blame the government because so many reasons come together. It's behavioral, it's financial, it's environment, and no fire in the belly sort of a thing. So I think there are so many things, and I don't think, even if you were to take one by one, how many can the government solve? I think it will really come up in the overall context of many things taking place simultaneously.
Mr. Guruswamy, I'll push that over to you. How many things can the government solve? But some things are the government's responsibility. Mr. Islam also made a statement. He said car manufacturers should have realized earlier, should have actually slowed down their production earlier. They actually waited till the last minute. My response to that is that it's really, really bad news for us if car manufacturers are bringing down their production, whether they did it on time or they did it later. Do you want to offer Mr. Islam some
Absolutely.
rebuttals? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I don't want to rebut him. I have a suggestion. You should go back to what the Vajpayee government did in a similar situation in 99-2000. It extended the depreciation year for heavy vehicles. It said, you can buy a heavy vehicle even if the 3 months left in the year and you will get the full year's depreciation. It gave the paramilitary and military special funds and said, you buy as many heavy vehicles as you want and we'll give you the money. So, there are things like that which you need to do to get the economy going again. Rather than, the government has not reacted at all. There hasn't been one crisis meeting. And this is a major, accounts for 2.5–3% of GDP.
Right.
It's a major industry. And it has, ramifications down the line. So government has still got to wake up on this and act on this. You go to, there is only 3 months left for the year. You extend the depreciation for the year. There are so many things you can do. The government has to make money available. And, the NBFCs are not getting money from the banks.
Yes.
The banks are not putting money. So MDFCs has no money of their own.
Mr. Goswami, did the government solve the NBFC problem in the budget?
There's only one NBFC. No, they haven't. They haven't even mentioned it. They said, no, this is all getting taken care of. We have provided 72,000 crores. 72,000 crores will go to write-off to adjust against the NPAs. And
yes.
So, you've got to sit down,
yes,
take people into confidence and act together.
Yes.
Now, only one big NBFC is in the fraud, which is IL&FS. I think government needs to get proactive. You've got to get worried now. If you constantly keep saying, no, Ola is doing well. Second-hand car sales have increased, mind you. Second-hand car sales have increased. They're going up over last year.
Yeah.
Because people just don't have there's no financing for new cars, so you buy an old car at half the price. So that is also happening.
All right, Mr. Khattar wants to come in. Mr. Khattar, go ahead.
Sell new cars. New cars add to GDP.
Mr. Khattar, go ahead.
Fine. For the last 15 years, I remember when I was president of SIM, we proposed that old vehicles should be scrapped. And scrapping in India compulsorily is not possible. Let government have a policy of incentivizing them. And millions of vehicles will go off the road which are causing accidents, which are causing pollution, which is causing everything. That policy is still pending for 15 years. On the other hand, government is insisting paying Euro 4, Euro 6, spend money. All this is not going to help the pollution at all. All the Euros we have had in the last 15 years, what is the result? And if they were to scrap these vehicles, incentivize them, suddenly you'll have a gap and these things will be able to take place. So bit by bit, there are things lying around. If they could be dusted and done that, so some movement will take place. But in any case, scrapping is not going to take overnight, but it will take time. But at least let's start doing it. Within a year or so, it might catch up.
Right. I have one more question to bring to Mr. Islam. Mr. Islam, we could say that the car data...
Added to this.
Yes, Mr. Goswami.
Added to this, they suddenly announced, Mr. Gadkari said, in 2 years we'll have only electric cars.
Yes, and
so
there are
incentives. What are you going to do with internal combustion engines after that?
Yes, incentives being offered to electric cars, but there aren't any electric cars to buy.
Absolutely.
No,
But
listen.
He said in 2 years...
one side they say we'll get electric cars, and they want...
internal combustion engines, and we'll go electric complete.
No, we'll steamroll.
The industry is saying we can't tool up for that.
Yes.
As a buyer, what am I going to say?
Yes, Mr. Khattar, please.
It's very interesting. One side you say that we are going to have electric vehicles or motorcycles and three-wheelers, and fuels will go down. On the other hand, we have about 65,000 dealer outlets. Government has told the oil companies to add another 70,000. I mean, if you are going to reduce the consumption of this, why are we adding another 70,000 petrol pumps across the country? One we are saying is that we'll get EVs. On the other hand, we are asking GAIL and others to put up a wider network of natural gas.
Yes.
Of course, it will go for the domestic use, but the major consumers are the automobiles. So my request is all agencies should sit down together, decide and give a definite roadmap to the industry. This knee-jerk, you know, the foreign companies don't protest. I ask them, why don't you protest? And they say we are working in 45 countries, Mr. Khattar. Every country has some problems. If we protest, we'll be known as protesters. We'll get a bad name. Only thing that we do is we get into the shell. And we will wait till those things improve. So without our knowing, they will reduce their investment, they'll reduce their commitment, and we'll have more problems.
Yes, we will have problems. In fact, I just want to take one last question to Mr. Zafar Islam, if I may. Mr. Islam, we could look at these auto numbers as, you know, sort of in a silo, but I want to keep reminding you that it was in fact the government who kept saying people are buying cars, so the economy is good for the longest time, which is why we continue to use cars as a yardstick of measure. But let's put it in context and let's look at everything else that has happened in the last 6 months. The RBI has downgraded our growth forecast. There's been falling GDP numbers, questions about the GDP numbers. There's a severe slowdown in what we call our core sector of industry, which is down to 2.6 from 4.7 last year. Investments are down, completion of projects are down, stocking up of projects are down. Most of our manufacturing is not running at full capacity. It's actually running at lower than full capacity. We have falling revenue. Our industrial production output, or the IIP index, is down. The growth in private sector is down, and there's a crisis in the NBFC sector, the airline sector, and the banking sector. Will the government now have emergency meetings of all agencies, like Mr. Khattar recommended, to fix this problem? Well,
let me tell you, government is taking feedback from the industry captains regularly. The Honorable Prime Minister had recently met and had a very detailed interaction with all the industry captains, understood their concern, and I'm sure that something has come in the budget, something may not have come in the budget, but as a policy decision, the government will definitely take all the appropriate policy decision to ensure that there is a spur in demand or the concern which gets addressed. But away from that, let me tell you one thing, which I can tell you with conviction: the government is proactively working. Government is sensitive about every issues which are in the marketplace, and government is taking appropriate action wherever it is needed. But let me tell you one thing which is very important also. Yes, I understand that the economy has slowed down in last 2 quarters, primarily because of the NBFC, the liquidity issue, the credit flow was not there.
We're running out
and
of
something
time.
which the MSME sector, the local. So the credit flow, that's what I said, credit flow, the liquidity issue was there. And that is something which actually led to all these issues. But those are being addressed, those concerns are being addressed. And I'm sure you will see that the demand is there. The second-hand market shows that the car demand is there. And even if you see overall in economy, away from last 2 quarters, but at least there is a sign that the capital formation is there. So private investment,
you would have otherwise blamed this on the previous government for an entire term. This time the previous government is you. So isn't really this a reaction of bad decisions you made in the last 5 years?
No, I'm not blaming anyone. I'm saying that
You're not blaming anyone because you can't blame anyone now.
We have laid the track. No. I'm saying we laid the track.
पिछले सरकार पे बोल दीजिए ना,
पिछले
सरकार ने क्या किया?
Had been taken by the government. It is now time to run the track.
Okay.
पिछले सरकार ने कहा तो if you just pay attention to what I said we laid the track. All the structural reform which needed to be undertaken had been undertaken by the government. Now it is time to reap the benefits. And that's why I'm saying that when the government has shifted from the consumption-led economy to investment-led economy and eventually to export-led economy, something which will ensure that all the policy decisions will ensure that all the investments are coming into the country. That will ensure
I just want to, okay, so I'm going to leave it there.
Job creation will there. All these issues will get addressed.
All right, so that's actually a wonderful picture that Mr. Islam painted for us, and I keep saying this. This is exactly like eating chips while telling your friend that you are going to lose a lot of weight and you're going to get fit and you're going to have washboard abs. But that's not going to happen until you actually go to the gym and you start working out and you go on a diet and you start eating healthy. This is like that. We can keep sitting around and talking about how this is going to be an export and an investment-led economy, but it's not going to happen unless we take emergency measures to stop the downward spiral that the economy is in right now. what is needed, and Mr. Jagdish Khattar and Mr. Mohan Guruswamy said very clearly that there are a whole list of things that can be done at this point. The previous governments, if you don't want to take UPA governments, then the Vajpayee government has done in the past, and it's all on the table. You can find those answers. The current government and the finance ministry needs to treat this like an emergency situation, because that is what it is. And you can say you laid down the railroad tracks and now it's time to reap the rewards, but the rewards are nowhere to be seen. Mr. Jagdish Khattar said very clearly that this is not a cyclical slowdown, because we don't know when the cycle will turn. And normally in a cycle, we can tell when it turns. 8 straight months of a slowdown in car sales is not a cycle, it is a spiral downwards. We need the government to treat this like an emergency. And if the union budget announcement was any indicator, you aren't treating this like an emergency right now. That's what the country needs.